It's Electric Drives. Your electric vehicle future starts right now. Welcome to the show. I'm Anthony Algmin, and I'm joined by my co-host, Bob Reese. We created this show to make it easier for others looking to move to electric vehicles, and that's more and more people every day. We're out there using EVs in normal commutes and road trips, and we'll share the wisdom we've gained from living our lives with electric vehicles. You can join in the conversation by sending your questions and topic ideas to questions@electricdrives.us, by joining the Electric Drives Facebook group, and by becoming a patron at patreon.com/electricdrives to get exclusive content and help support the show. Bob, how are you doing today?
Oh, pretty good. Reaching almost the end of a week, so to speak, because I've had pretty much of a marathon going on here lately.
Yeah, and we didn't record last week, even though we had episodes lined up, and so you guys haven't heard any stops. But we took a week off, and now we're getting back into the swing of things. And so I know, Bob, like you said, you've been on the road a lot. What's been going on? Like, where have you been, and how's charging going out in the wild? I keep hearing more and more of these charging stations and places being just full of cars, and more electric cars are getting out there. What's your experience been?
Oh, last week my first stop was at Bloomington Normal, Illinois charging station. And at that charging station, it's on the back. It's right behind the Rivian plant. But surprisingly, there were 3 Bolts and a Mustang. And then there was a Porsche waiting to charge. So the one Bolt finished and he took off, and then the other cars replaced it, and everybody was happy, so to speak. And some of it is just some of the guys were trying to charge. One guy was going down to Florida, and so he wanted to make sure he had a good charge to go that direction. I told him about the chargers in Springfield and that they were really running well and so on. But yeah, it was pretty busy there. And then I was at the hotel and charged there, and nobody's found that hotel. So I'm pretty happy about that, because I haven't had anybody jockeying for position as far as charging at night. And I had a couple long runs during the day where I might put on a couple 100 miles going out to see various customers, and then coming back to Peoria as a home base. And then I had to go to Quad Cities on the way home. And so that was probably about 600 miles that week. And this week I'm probably up to 600 too.
It's amazing. It just the amount of miles and the amount that you're constantly doing this is just so much more than what most people will ever encounter. It's really interesting to get your feedback on it. But just thinking about your charging station where you're competing with, Rivians, even though there weren't one there. I mean, you're right by the plant. You've got a bunch of Bolts. You have, certainly the Porsches every now and then. You've got, Mustangs are out there, Volkswagens are out there. You've got Hyundais and Kias are coming along, even though we don't see too many of those in Illinois yet. But it's just like, that's the one biggest thing that keeps me from wanting to go from Tesla back to literally anything else. Is just that we have so many more charging options as Tesla owners when we're out on the road. And for me, like, it very rarely is going to matter, because I could take a road trip here and there a couple times a year and do just fine no matter what. But that peace of mind and just security blanket of knowing that those Tesla superchargers are always working, and you can usually get into them relatively easy. I know in California there's a lot more demand and a lot more cars and what have you. But for the most part, whenever I've gone, there's been at least half of the stalls open for supercharging. And so it's never, too big of a challenge from that perspective. But I just feel like, with the amount of miles you put on, you clearly have shown that you can definitely manage between what you do with the hotels and what you do with the the fast charging options, especially. I mean, you got to give Electrify America credit in that they exist now and they are pretty comprehensive. I mean, if you're going to fast charge somewhere, better odds than not, it's going to be Electrify America.
Yeah, they seem to have the largest network, and luckily lately I've been seeing more of their service crews out addressing situations. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, the one in Rockford, they were changing out the cables, which the cables are rather heavy because they've got coolant running through the cables to keep them. You're running a high current through those cables.
Mm-hmm.
So you got the coolant running through it, and they were replacing one of the cables on one of the boxes. And I was talking with them about some of the other operations they were going to, and they were going out to Williamsburg in Iowa. And I said, yeah, I've been having trouble with, I've seen that there's been some issues with one of the first chargers there. And they said, it's not showing up on our data that there's an issue with that one. We're having trouble with number 4. And I said, yeah, that one's been kind of weird. I haven't had trouble, but I know IKEA was having trouble with it. So I don't know if it's a translation issue or exactly what's going on. But it's kind of nice to talk with the guys and gives them a heads up on what's going on at some of the other chargers around.
Yeah. Well, I also would think like they shouldn't be relying solely on trouble tickets or where they've been reported as
Right.
bad. Like
Right.
they really, like, I do data analytics and data systems for a living, and I'm like, you should be able to see if you have 4 charging bays and numbers 2 and 3 have 6 times the usage of numbers 1 and 4, maybe there's an issue with number 1 or 4. Like,
Correct.
especially, because I use urinal rules at these charging stations, right? Like I want to go to wherever is furthest away from people whenever I'm charging, because you don't want to share anything. You want it to be as separate as possible. So like if there's a person on 1, I'm going to 4 is the first one that I'm going to try, and so like, those, that's just going to be the natural thing. And so, yeah, I feel like like so many things, right? It's easy to focus on build out and much less sexy to focus on support and maintenance and
Correct.
operational ability. But for an Electrify America that spends far too much time giving away electricity for free because they're having so many upgrades or challenges or whatever, like, I mean, that's not a good business. Giving your thing away for free is generally not a good business model unless you're using it as a direct promotion or something like that. But Electrify America does that more often than they would probably like to.
They seem to have cut back quite a bit, though, since many of the new cars that come out, I think the Ford and the Kias and the Hondas all get free for, sometimes they say for 2 years, but when you read the fine print, you actually see it's only a certain number of hours of time that they get to use the charger. And I thought I had seen one of them where they limit you to 30-minute sessions. So you don't hog the chargers, and they charge fast anyhow. So they're trying to train you to do a high turnover and not hog the chargers.
I am excited about the future of all of the electric charging options because of the, try not to talk too much politics, but the fact is that you're going to see a lot more charging options in the future based on some of the policies and stuff that have been put in place. And so for better or worse, it's better for us driving electric vehicles. There'll be more options. So I think, that should be nice because it should ease concerns people have around being able to take road trips or what have you. Because I really do think, like, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, spot, because I know your Bolt doesn't have the longest range in the world, but I really feel like a 200-mile actual range is fine.
Yeah.
Even for road trips, I actually think as long as you have enough charging options. So that's the big if, right?
Right.
As long as you have enough charging options, 200 miles is fine. Like if I can drive 200 miles and then stop and use the restroom, I am good. Like that sounds about right. Like I do not need to go more than 3 hours in a stretch without getting up for a couple minutes. Like that is totally fine with me. As long as it doesn't take, another hour to charge, I'm okay with that. I think that 200 to 250 mile range is perfect for most purposes because that gives you plenty of coverage for normal around town driving, especially if you could charge at home.
Right.
I just don't think you need to pay the premium under most circumstances for the extra big battery packs that some of these cars are getting. Like, yes, your Mercedes EQS can go 400 plus miles. Why? Like, you don't need to, but I guess that's the whole point, right? If you're driving a Mercedes, you want to be able to do whatever you want. So
Yeah, I tend to agree because my bladder only lasts like 100 miles or 2 hours or so. And so stopping in Geneseo on the way to Des Moines or something like that, that's right about that time limit of like 120, 140 miles. And stop there, use the facilities, and then you have enough that you can make the next charging station or stop for lunch in Quad Cities or stop for lunch someplace else on the road.
yeah.
And when I talk about stopping for lunch, I don't want to give the misnomer I'm going to a 5-star 2-hour dinner place. I'm talking about going to a sandwich stop or something like that to, you know, so it's not a real long time that's invested to get an adequate charge to go on to the next charger type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm still waiting for the day when I will actually play some of the video games that are built into my car. Like I just have
Yeah,
never had a reason or opportunity to do so. I don't like, there's all these gimmicks that I'm like, I have bothered with none of them. I have done nothing that makes a Tesla because I haven't needed to. I'm driving from place to place. I'm if I'm at a charging stop, by the time I'm ready to go, like, and I would play a game or whatever, I've got 5 minutes at most left on my charge. Like, what am I going to do?
right, right. Yeah, I don't see the logic in it. Of course, what do? I sometimes I'll stop and check emails and so on, or send communication or with something like that. But I don't see watching movies and playing games at a stop because you generally aren't taking that long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Go
I
to a
think actually they're
Casey's and
better. Their better usefulness is like when you're taking your kids to like some sports practice and you need to just hang out for an hour instead of going home. You could just watch Netflix in the car. I'm down with that. That makes sense to me. I could do that. But like, yeah, and a charging stop, like if I'm doing a road trip, like there's not enough time to get deeply into that or watch a show or something like that, unless I'm pulling like an overnight or something like that. I just want to chill and you know rest for the night, and I'm going to sleep in my car. I guess and you could do that. I'm not going to, but that's probably an option.
I guess if you're at a level 2 charger, then that'd be more of a
True,
possibility. But
true.
on a DC fast charger, 20 minutes, a half hour, you've got another 100 and 200 miles range, whatever, that takes you farther down the road. Even with the Bolt that only doesn't charge as fast as other cars, if you get 100 miles range, that's the next restroom break. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand it totally. I'll have a better handle this next week because I'm going to Upper Wisconsin,
Mm.
and since the weather is turning, I know my range isn't going to be as great. So I'll probably have to make a few more frequent stops.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's something too that folks need to remember is like when you get into these winter months, your battery will not last as long. The battery chemistry is a little less efficient. You're going to be running your HVAC systems, and the heat is much more power intensive than air conditioning, which
Yes.
in combustion cars you think of air conditioning as putting a bigger drag on the engine because there's all this excess heat in those engines because they're so inefficient. That's why the heat doesn't really cost you much in terms of efficiency in a gas powered car. It's because it's already so inefficient that it's got plenty of heat to spare. But in an electric car, that's not the case, and so you have to use the resistance heating to heat the cabin. And that's why they say too, you're better off first leveraging as much of the seat heating if you have that option as you can, because that's more efficient than heating the whole cabin. So just keep that in mind if you are in a if this might be, because I'm sure there's plenty of people out there this is their first year driving an electric vehicle. in the wintertime. And you don't have to overthink it, but just be aware, you're going to get a little bit worse mileage for the charge, and just be cognizant of what you're doing on the heating side of things. But it's fine. You'll be all right.
Yeah, you may want to move up your time because right now you're charging until what 6:30 or so, and then you put it in preconditioned so you can leave at 7 or something like that.
I charge until 5, and then I
Yeah,
precondition at 7 a.m. And so I set it up so that my charging session is done before 5 a.m. And I should have, I will typically have plenty of time overnight to be able to do it, because I'm on a 48 amp level 2 charger, so that's not too
yeah. So
not
if
too
you
good.
can get in one or two charging or not charging, but preconditioning types of timing, the cabin is nice and toasty even after the first one. And I've sat in the car when it is doing preconditioning at charging stations, and there's a pretty hefty draw if you're having to warm up at 10 degrees outside.
Yeah.
You might be pulling 5 to 7 kilowatts, and if you're only putting out 7 kilowatts on the charger, you're not adding much to the battery. But so sometimes you may want to move up that time instead of having to go until 7 o'clock and finish at 7 o'clock, like you do. Have it finish at 5, and then hit the preconditioning a couple times.
Yeah, and that's what's nice about the way the Tesla set up, is that I have those controls are separate. So if I say, all right, charge during off peak, I can just set what the off peak period is, and it'll charge during that, and then it'll precondition at whatever time I say I want to leave by. So if I say I'm going to leave at 7 a.m., I just set that, and then it has the car nice, warm, and toasty for me, at 6:45, and then I can just go. So it's smart enough to know both sides of that, so I don't have to like manually kick something off, or um like even the preconditioning, like it'll still pull the energy it needs from the charger um
Right,
to get
right.
the cabin up to speed. So
Yeah, you're not taking more for heating the cabin, or in some cases, I know my car sometimes goes into defrost mode.
yeah.
So it runs the side mirrors and the back window um, defrosters too, which
Mhm.
is a pretty good draw too.
Yeah.
That's only when it drops down to like low 30s and so on. It figures there might be some frost on the windows, or um, snow and ice and so on, and it melts it right off too. It's fairly impressive that way, but it's taking a lot of power to do that. So if you can have it charge during the night, be finished, and then hit precondition a couple times, then you're not having to use the battery. You're saving the battery for transportation rather
Mhm.
than using it up for warming the cabin and so on.
Right, which, and we've talked about this on a previous episode, is that's why we do the always be charging, right? Like if you're
Yeah,
plugged in, then your car says, okay, I have enough power, I can optimize it, I can make sure that the car stays at a reasonable minimum temperature, I can make sure that it doesn't get too hot inside, I can make sure that the battery is being treated for carefully, and it's ready to go when you're ready to go. And that's all, that stuff happens so much better when the car's plugged in, because it knows, hey, I have an unlimited source of energy here, we've got the battery charged, I'm going to use the outlet for what we need to right now, and we're good to go. So I definitely like that, and that's where you just got to trust the car to just take care of its own business and be ready to go. But that's where I've been very impressed with the Tesla, is that I've never once since I got it had an issue with it charging on time, or
hmm.
having any issues with the charger circuit breaker tripping or any of that stuff, which I had problems with the Ford and the Volkswagen. The Volkswagen's issues with scheduled charging are just notorious, and I'm still mad about that. But theoretically, they've at least fixed that for the new cars. They still haven't issued the software update for the 2021s, but hey, um, that's supposed to be coming at some point. But so they have well established problems there. But like even the Ford, when I was using the Ford scheduling mechanism, on one day it just tripped the circuit breaker on the EVSE. Still not sure why exactly that happened, but
It
you
shouldn't
know
have happened.
no, it shouldn't have, but it did. and it only happened once, but still, it led led me to have not enough charge for that day, and had to deal with some consequences there. And so, you know, it just shows the maturity of the software and the way that they handle those things. But in the end, I think as it's getting colder, certainly uh, adds an element of complexity, but it's not too bad. It's not like anything is fundamentally different. You just want to have a little bit more buffer whenever possible, and what you are charging to, or how you're planning your trips, or what have you. But a little bit of an adjustment, just like everybody in the wintertime has to make a little bit of an adjustment, and then you deal with the cold and move on. But hey, it's still pretty good way to travel and do your commutes, or do what you need to, even in the cold. I will take the electric car any day.
Yeah, it's a lot more efficient than a gasoline car. Even when it does get cold and your efficiencies drop, it's still a lot more efficient.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, Bob, we're about time. We're a little over time, actually.
Well,
Any last thoughts on today's topic?
not really. No.
Okay. Well, that wraps up our show for today. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that YouTube bell icon. Please send your questions and topic suggestions to questions@electricdrives.us, and we'd love for you to join us on Facebook and Patreon. All the links are, of course, in the show notes. Thank you for spending some time with us, and we wish you a smooth road ahead on your own electric drives.